We're here at the Pioneer Museum in Dade City. They're doing a Civil War reenactment. This is my good friend Pablo, the outlaw Indian. So, over 20 years in law enforcement, several years in the Marine Corps. Why do you want to call yourself an outlaw? Kind of goes against everything he stood for over 2 decades of his life. But today we're just talking about old Florida, like old law enforcement history of Florida. Florida became a territory in 1821, and before that, if you remember, Florida was owned by the Spanish. So there was 3 big problems inherited by law enforcement when Florida became a territory of the United States. First one, all the slaves being in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina would flee those states and come to Florida because it was a Spanish colony. Spain didn't have slavery, and so the slaves would have asylum here. They would come to Florida. They'd a lot of them integrated with the Indians. So when the United States took over Florida, law enforcement then had a ton of runaway slaves, and were expected to deal with it. Another problem in Florida, Indians, outlaw Indians, right? That tribes of Indians come down, the Cherokee came down, integrated with the Seminole Indians. Remember, in the 1830s, you had 3 Seminole Indian wars, right? So you had the Seminole Indian Wars. Law enforcement dealt with that. Anytime someone was arrested, whether it be military or runaway slaves, or just regular law enforcement duties, anytime someone was arrested, they would bring them to the sheriffs, and the sheriffs had to deal with it. There was no prison system. And one of the third big problems in Florida, and this one kind of surprised me, pirates. Did you know there were still pirates in Florida in the 1820s? Yep, Pirates of the Caribbean, they still existed in the Caribbean, obviously, and they used the coast of Florida. And during the Spanish days, Spain really didn't put a whole lot of effort into Florida. And so once the U.S. took over and started patrolling those waters, pirates were captured and they were brought to Florida sheriffs. Now, if you had to think, what do you think would be the biggest issue for a sheriff in Territorial Florida?
By what you just said, I would say a language barrier.
Well, yeah, definitely a language barrier with all the Indians and the Spanish-speaking culture. That was huge. But here was a big issue: money. Do you know how much money they put towards the law enforcement, the sheriffs and the marshals in the Territory of Florida? None. 0. It was a fee-based system. So if they brought a runaway slave, if someone was arrested, there would be fees involved in it, and the sheriff was expected to take part of that fee for his salary. And they hoped this fee-based system would support him and his family financially, but it just didn't work out that way. Think of this. Say outlaw here, say I arrested him for shooting at somebody. Where do I put them? There wasn't no jails, and they didn't send me no money for jails. So I would end up chaining them or tying them to a pole in my barn or somewhere. I had to feed them. I had to keep them. I had to guard them, and I work alone, and there was no money coming in. How hard do you think it would be for him to escape? So there was a lot of escapees back in that time, and it was just a really difficult situation to be in. Most sheriffs didn't stay sheriff for more than one term, 1 year. They would lose all their money. They would go bankrupt. It was just something they couldn't do. They were expected to collect taxes. Every county wasn't big enough to have a sheriff, so a single sheriff might have to work 2 or 3 counties as tax collector, law enforcement, plus dealing with all the issues with that we've already discussed with slaves and the military coming in contact with them and needing their support. So being a law enforcement officer in Territorial Florida was just a no-win situation. These guys got absolutely zero support. They would write letters to get support financially or to be compensated for expenditures. And here's another thing. Territorial Florida, you know, before 1821, it was Spanish law. So the sheriff would come in, let's say of Polk County or Manatee County or whatever county, the sheriff would come there. The people living there would have been living under Spanish law, common law, for however many years. Now they fall under common English law. Plus they just kind of made up the laws as they went along, as was a necessity. So there was nobody really knew what to expect, you know.
There could be issues of land ownership as well.
Land, yeah, oh, exactly.
Own land under the Spanish, but now it doesn't pertain to the new law under the English common law.
Yeah. So who owns what land now? This was mine under Spanish law, but Spain don't own this land anymore. And you know, who owns what? How do we enforce that? And it basically came down to money. Whoever had the money, talking about setting up for a corrupt system, right? Whoever had the money and could pay the law enforcement to do their bidding, that was pretty much how it was done in many places. So, you know, the runaway slaves problems, the Seminole Indian Wars, money, language, and it wasn't, here's a misnomer, it wasn't just Spanish living here. You know, it was settled, you know, Spain found St. Augustine way back in the 1500s, but the people that came over for 100 years after that, they weren't all from Spain. People, just like they would come to the United States from all different countries in Europe, they would flee, let's say, Germany and Holland they would go to Spain, they would register, and they would get a Spanish name. So your name might be William Edwards, and now you're Guillermo Lopez.
The Indians.
Yeah, and they came to Spain, or I'm sorry, they came to Spanish Florida. They weren't Spanish. So you talk about the language thing, yeah, there was people from England, from Spain, from Holland, from Germany, from Italy, from every country in Europe that was fleeing whatever circumstance they were in Europe, looking for the same thing the colonials did in America, looking for a new beginning. So 1845, Florida became a state. Wonder how things would change when they became a state. Next video. Thanks, guys.